Say yes. We started our discussion with annotations, so we'll go with annotations. Okay. In the previous session, I told that annotations will reduce the configuration that is defined in XML file, right? Annotations will reduce the configuration defined in the XML file. Okay, let's start. Okay, so now when it comes to Spring, there are multiple annotations are there. So now we are going to look at about all the Spring annotations one by one. Okay, so coming to annotations part. Okay, coming to annotations part. Okay, let's see. The first annotation that we are going to see. In the previous class, I just told about something like, if you look at any annotation, suppose if you look at any annotation, that every annotation at the time of creating the annotation, some target is fixed for it. Which means based on the target, we can understand that that annotation can be used at variable, or that annotation can be used at method, or that annotation can be used at constructor, or that annotation could be used at parameter, or it could be used at a class or an interface. Correct? So basically what I'm trying to say is that different annotations can be used at different levels. Every annotation is to perform some configuration. We use annotation to do some configuration. Actually, earlier we used to do configuration in the XML file, right? But I told XML is a bit complicated. And in XML, if you want to write configuration, then what? The configuration is going to become very longer. If suppose you write a very huge XML configuration, it is very complicated configuration. In future, if you want to do any changes in the configuration, it is a tricky part. So to reduce XML, or even to avoid writing the XMLs in Spring, not only in Spring, generally in Java, either you go for Hibernate or you go for Spring or you go for struts, there are some annotations got introduced. Every framework has provided some annotations. There are annotations in Hibernate, there are annotations in struts framework, there are annotations in Spring framework. So in every framework, there are some annotations provided. Even in the web development using a technology like a servlet technology. So there also earlier we used to write web.xml file, and which is going to become bigger when there are multiple servlet classes are there, when there are multiple filter classes are there, and when there are multiple parameters we need to configure with each of them. So in that situation, this XML file is going to become very longer. So to avoid this kind of XML, or to minimize the XML, or even to avoid the XML, annotations got introduced. So the purpose of annotation is also used to provide a meta information. Every annotation will provide some information that is called meta information. And that information could be at field level or class level, or could be at variable level, method level, constructor level, or parameter level. So these are all called as different levels where we can able to write the meta information, and that is what annotations are all about. So annotations are basically used for writing the configuration. Configuration is nothing but metadata. You are writing configuration, nothing but you are writing the metadata. So in order to define the metadata, we are going to use annotations. Earlier we used XML. With XML also we can perform configurations, but writing the configuration with XML is a bit complicated. And that's why we are going for annotations. So now we want to understand about what are the annotations that are available in the Spring. So whatever annotations we are discussing now, these are the annotations which we need to use in everywhere entire Spring framework. I mean, when we are going to enter into Spring Boot, then into microservices. So everywhere that we are going to use these annotations. These are annotations which we should use for entire Spring framework, that is in Spring Boot and microservices. These are very, very common annotations. And now we are going to look at about the first category of annotations. I mean, I'm just going to talk about, there is a category called stereotype annotations. First, I'll tell you. Initially, I'm going to talk about annotations called at component. Next, I'm going to talk about one more thing called at service. Next, I'm going to talk about annotation called at repository. At controller. At REST controller. Okay, so I'm talking about these annotations initially first in the session today first. These are annotations, and do remember every annotation starts with symbol at the rate. At the rate is a symbol, is an indication that this is an annotation. And do remember that every annotation name starts with uppercase letter. For example, component C in uppercase letter. For example, REST controller R and C, both the letters are in uppercase, like that. In annotation, the first letter of each word is going to be a capital, like your class name. Okay, like your class name. So first letter of each word is going to be a capital letter in the annotation. That is mandatory. Now, these are all the annotations which are given by Spring. There are many annotations are there. First, we are going to look at about these annotations. And all these annotations are actually called as one category called stereotype annotations. All these are called as stereotype annotations. Okay. So now we are going to understand what the meaning of stereotype. These are all annotations are called as stereotype annotations. Now we need to understand about why these are all called as a specific name called stereotype. Actually, basically stereotype meaning, we can say a type which tells the role of a class. A type which tells the role of a class is called stereotype. That's the definition of a stereotype. I repeat once again. Stereotype means a type which tells the role of a class. The role of a type or role of a class. A type which tells the role of a class is called what type? Stereotype. That's what the meaning of stereotype. Stereotype definition, a type which tells the role of a class. This is called stereotype. This is called stereotype. Stereotype means a type which tells the role of a class. Now there are annotations available here. These 5 annotations comes under one category called as stereotype annotations. In that, the first annotation is called what? At the rate component. At the rate component. So this annotation, first of all these 5 annotations, whatever I have just told you as a stereotype annotations, these are all class level annotations. These are all called what level? Class level. These are all class level annotations. Class level annotations means we are going to use them before the class, above the class otherwise. Means we cannot use them at a variable level, means field level. Variable means field level. So we cannot use at a field level, or we cannot use at method level, or we cannot use at constructor level. We cannot use all of them. These annotations we can only use at what level? Class level. These are 5 annotations comes under one category. The name of the category is called what? Stereotype annotations. Now, stereotype means what? It is a type which tells the role of a class. Is called what type? Stereotype. Let's see more understanding of this. Good. So coming to, we are going to discuss about the first annotation, which is called component. Actually in Spring, okay, you try to understand now. Suppose if I want to declare that a class is a Spring Bean component. I want to declare that a class is a Spring Bean class. Spring Bean class is also called a Spring Bean component. We use a word Spring Bean class. Otherwise, we use a word Spring Bean component. It's a Spring managed bean class. So if I want to declare that a class is a Spring managed bean class, or if I want to say that a class is a Spring Bean class, then on top of the class, I should use an annotation called component. If I write component annotation on top of the class, that class becomes a Spring managed bean class. Okay. Now, then what is the use of, okay, I'm writing component annotation on top of a class. Another class I am writing, but on top of that, I am not writing this annotation. So what is the difference? Actually, in Spring, there is a facility available called, in Spring. A Spring framework or Spring container has provided one facility called components auto scanning. You are going to learn many things today. Please try to concentrate. Very important session you are attending in the today's class. There is a concept available in Spring called components auto scanning. So what this feature? It is one of the facility that Spring framework has provided. This facility means Spring only will automatically scan to identify the Spring managed bean classes and it will register them with a Spring container without configuring that bean class explicitly. Spring only will automatically scan for the Spring bean classes and then will register them in the Spring container. So who will do this work? Spring framework only will do that. This facility name is called components auto scan. This is a facility called components auto scan. Components auto scan. Are you able to get my point? Okay. So, of course, I'll tell you how to enable these components auto scanning again. But its meaning is what? What is the meaning of this components auto scanning meaning? Components auto scanning meaning is what? Components auto scanning means Spring framework will automatically scan for the Spring bean classes or Spring managed bean classes, and then it will register that bean class with the Spring container. Okay. So which means what? You no need to write like a bean tag in the XML file. In the XML file, we use it to write bean tag, right? That tag you no need to write. That tag you no need to write. Who will take care of that? Spring only will take care. Spring only will take care. This feature name is called what? Components auto scanning. I will tell you how to enable this. It's a feature available, but we need to enable. Like auto wiring is also one facility that given by Spring framework. Bean auto wiring, right? But by default it is disabled. And how you need to enable that? By using an attribute called auto wire. Auto wire is equal to, you specify the value like a by name or by type or constructor, then only it is enabled. Similarly, there is one facility that is provided by Spring Framework is called what? Components auto scan. Okay, good. So during this components auto scan, I'll tell you how to enable this, but during this auto scanning, how does the Spring identify that? How does the Spring will identify that this is a Spring managed bean class and this is not a Spring managed bean class to register in the container? Now it is going to check for this annotation component at the class level. At the class level. At the class level, it is going to check for this annotation. If this annotation is available at the class level, then Spring will identify that what? This class is a Spring managed bean class. So it will register that bean in the Spring container. It will register that bean in the Spring container. Means it will load that bean into Spring container application context. Nothing but it will register that class with the Spring application context. Are you able to follow me now? Spring container is called application context only. Annotations are not supported by Bean Factory. And from today, we no need to discuss about Bean Factory. There are two types of containers are available. Bean Factory is one type of container. Application context is the other type of the container. But Bean Factory container will only load the definitions from XML file. It can't understand annotations. So from now onwards, we no need to discuss anything about Bean Factory. Always we are going to use about application context. Good, good. So which annotation that Spring is going to look for at the class level to register that bean in the Spring container, to register that class with the Spring container at the red component. Now this is called stereotype annotation, which means it is telling that this class is a Spring managed bean component. This class is not a Spring managed bean component. Are you able to follow me? Right? So how to specify that this is Spring managed bean class? It is not a Spring bean class. Okay. For example, as per previous example knowledge you have with you, for example, I have two classes. One is called movie finder. For example, I am writing at the rate component because this example we discussed it already. At the rate component, I am writing a public class, one class in my project called, in my project I am creating a class called movie finder. Instead that whatever, leave it. And I'm also writing one more class called movie class. Movie is a one Pojo class. For this movie class, I want to create object. See, if I want to create an object for a class, then I no need to register it as a Spring bean in the container. You see, component annotation I'm writing on top of this movie finder class, but I'm not writing the annotation at the movie class. Now, during this auto scanning, Spring will only identify which class as a Spring managed bean class, movie finder, but not the movie class, because it is going to check for which annotation on top of the class. It is going to look for component annotation at the class level. And if this annotation is present at the class level, then Spring will identify that what? This is a Spring bean class. So it will register that bean with the container. If once a bean class registered with the container, then container will create object. Container will take care of injecting the dependencies, initializing the bean, destroying the bean. Life cycle will be taken care by Spring container. That's called application context. So this is the annotation called what? At the rate component. Okay. With which name? With which name? Or with which ID? ID or name? I told you anyone is okay. With which name this class is registered? This bean class is registered in the Spring container, because you know at the time of writing XML file, bean tag is containing an ID attribute. In the bean tag, what are you writing? ID attribute you are writing. ID is to identify uniquely that particular component or class. Right. So what is the class name here? Movie finder. So Spring will register this particular Spring bean class with the Spring container application context with the same as class name as ID. Okay, with the same as class name as ID. So tell me, what's the class name here? Movie finder with the first letter in lowercase. With the first letter in lowercase. Now you tell me this class is registered in the Spring container with an ID called what? Movie finder. M in lowercase. With the first letter in lowercase. Same as class name, but with the first letter in lowercase. This is how this component get registered in the Spring container. For that, which annotation is given? @component. @component. Okay, one more thing.
Sir, can
If
you
you want to
explain the
customize,
last part? Last part, sir,
wait,
lowercase part.
Wait. Try to listen clearly. See here. What I'm trying to say now, this annotation when you write this annotation called @component, okay, this class will be registered. It is a Spring Bean class, first of all. It is a Spring managed Bean class. So how to specify that it's a Spring managed Bean class? There is annotation called @component. So when auto scanning is started, which is started? Auto scanning. When auto scanning is started, then Spring is going to look for or search for Spring managed Bean classes. And how does it identify whether it is a Spring managed Bean class or not a Spring managed Bean class? By using this annotation. If this annotation is found at the class level, then Spring will identify that this class is what? Spring managed Bean class. Then Spring will register this Bean with the Spring application context container. I mean with the Spring container with what ID? With a class name as ID. What's the class name? Movie Finder. So ID of this class also Movie Finder. Movie Finder. Now, suppose you want to customize. You don't want to register with the name Movie Finder. You want to customize it. You want to specify that. You want to tell the Spring that register this Spring Bean class with the context, application context with the so and so name. You want to customize it, not the class name. You want some other name. For example, MF, not Movie Finder, MF. Then while writing this annotation, I can provide parameter for this annotation. Annotations can have parameters also. Annotations can have parameters also. Parameters we have to specify within parentheses, as we know already. Constructor parameters, method parameter means definitely we are going to provide within parentheses. Within parentheses. So within the parentheses, what I am writing, value is an attribute. What the attribute name? Value. Value is equal to MF. Attribute name is value. Parameter name is value. Its value is equal to MF. Am I right? Now, if you look at this annotation, now you tell me the Spring container is now going to, the Spring is going to register this particular Spring Bean class in the container, in the application context with which ID? MF. If I don't write value is equal to MF, with which name it is going to register? Same as class name with the first letter in lowercase. This is a way how you can able to customize it. Very good. And one more thing. If you look at this annotation, and this is a very this is a common concept everywhere in Java, whether you are in Spring Framework or any other technology, the common concept I'm trying to tell you now. Look at this. Suppose any annotation when you are writing, suppose if you are writing an annotation with one parameter like this. Suppose when you write annotation with one parameter, and if the name of that parameter is value, then you can omit or you can avoid writing the name of the parameter. And this is applicable only when you're writing annotation with only one parameter, and if the parameter name is value. It is applicable for only this. In this case, you are writing a annotation with only one parameter, first point. Second point, that parameter name is value. Then you can avoid writing the parameter name. You can avoid writing the parameter name in the sense what? I can write @component directly without writing value is equal to, directly also I can write MF. So what is the difference that you find? Previously, I have written what? component. Because you should not confuse at the time of writing sometimes I may forget writing value is equal to. So don't confuse. Sometimes I'll write like this. Sometimes I will write component of, for example, mm. Both are same. Both are same. Because if you look at this, I'm writing annotation. With how many parameters I'm writing annotation? Only one parameter. If my annotation has only one parameter, and if the name of the parameter is value and not other, only value. Okay. See this annotation with one parameter. And what is the name of the parameter? Value. If name of the parameter is value, then we can avoid writing the name. It is optional. We can write the same thing like this also. The same thing like this also I can write. Okay. Right. Let me write the other example. Let's say, for example, I'm writing a class like this. At the rate component component, I'm writing public class. Let's say my class name is logger service. You tell me, suppose I've written like this now. Okay, there is a class I'm creating called logger service in my project. It's one Spring Bean. It's a Spring Bean class. So how to specify that it's a Spring Bean class? You have to write annotation. What annotation you should write? At the rate component. Where should you write? Before the class. So above the class, I'm writing one annotation called what? At the rate component. Am I clear with that? At the rate component. Good. So tell me, when the components auto scanning is started, when components auto scan feature started. Oh, sure. Okay. When the components auto scan started, now you tell me Spring will identify this class as a Spring Bean class. It identifies it's a Spring Bean class. Correct. It's Spring Bean class. Now you tell me with which name it is registered in the Spring container? With a class name. With which name? Same as class name. With the first letter in lowercase. So logger service. Oh, correct. Logger service. For example, I want register it with name log service, not logger service. For example, means I want to customize it. How can I able to customize it now? I can write what value is equal to start double quotes log service. I can able to write like this. Otherwise, or another way of writing the same thing. No need of writing value. Directly what I can write? Log service. Parameter name is optional. We can avoid. But when this is possible? When this is possible? If that annotation has only one attribute and if the attribute name is value. For example, these annotations will get later, but for example, I'm writing at the rate get mapping value is equal to /fetch comma producers is equal to, I get it side by side also, but to get neatly, I'm writing one after the other by keeping comma. Application /JSON. Suppose I'm writing an annotation like this. Now you tell me this annotation has how many parameters? This annotation has how many parameters? There are two parameters are available. Okay. One parameter name is what? Value. Another parameter name is what? Producers. There are two parameters are available. When there are two parameters are available, can I avoid writing this name? Can I avoid writing this name, parameter name value?
No.
This value parameter can I avoid like this? No. When can I avoid? When it is optional to write this parameter name as value. If that
Single
annotation has a
parameter.
single parameter, but there are two parameters are available. That's why I cannot avoid this. This example I'm telling you. Am I clear with that? Very good. Very good. Suppose I don't have the second one. Assume that I don't have the second one. I have annotation like this only. Then you tell me this annotation has how many parameters? Only one parameter. And what's the name of the parameter? Value. The name of the parameter is value. Then what can I do? I can avoid it or not? It's optional. It is optional. I can write, otherwise I can leave it. So what can I write now? @get mapping. @get mapping. What can I write? /fetch. Is it clear to all of you? Done. Done. This is important. Don't confuse. If I write sometimes like this, immediately you have to understand. What you have to understand? Oh, the name of the parameter is value. That's why it is optional. Okay, like that. Very good. So which annotation we are discussing? @component. Very good. Oh, correct. So tell me, why should I write @component annotation at class level? In order to specify that this is a Spring Bean class or Spring Managed Bean class, right? So that who will automatically register this class with application context? Spring container or Spring will register that. Then once it is registered in the Spring container, then Spring container will take care of the bean. Nothing but Spring container will create object, will inject the dependencies, and also will manage the initialization part, destruction part, destroy part. Who will take care of life cycle? Spring container. So which annotation that we are going to write? @component. @component. Okay, very good. And one more. Suppose if I talk about @service. Actually, @service annotation is also created from @component. It's a sub annotation of @component. In our terminology of interfaces, we say child interface. If interface 2 extends interface 1, I told in the last class, every annotation type is also one interface, but annotations are called special interfaces, right? So you tell me, in case of interfaces, if interface 2 extends interface 1, we are calling interface 1 as a parent, interface 2 as a child. Here also, I can say child annotation. What's the child annotation of component? @service. These differences and are very important. We can call it as a child interface. Not only this one child interface, I told out of 5, remaining 4 are child interfaces of what? Component. What are the remaining 4? @service. What are the other names I gave? @repository, @controller, @rest controller. These are all childs of component. So very good. I'll tell you. See, @service, every annotation, I mean, these are called stereotype annotations. They are going to specify, they are going to tell the role of a class, in the application. What's the stereotype meaning? Stereotype meaning a type which tells the role of a class. A type which tells the role of a class is called stereotype. Am I clear with that? They are called what type? Stereotype. Very. Coming to the annotation called @service. Am I clear with that? Okay, good. This annotation used to specify that it is a Spring Managed Bean class and it is a service class. It is a Spring Managed class. It's a Spring Managed Bean class and it is a service class. Service class means it is a class in which some business logic is implemented. So how to identify in a project whether it is a business logic layer class, okay, or whether it is a presentation layer logic class or a data access layer logic class? I no need to go to the coding of the class. I no need to go through the code to identify that whether it is a business class or data access layer class or presentation layer class. I no need to go to that. Just on top of the class, by looking at the annotation, I can specify, I can understand. Look at the annotation at the class level. That annotation will tell the role of the class. If I write @service, what does it mean? It is a Spring managed bean class and it is a service class, service layer class. This class belongs to which layer? Service layer classes contains what logic? Business logics. Business logics. Able to follow me? Contains what logics now? Business logics. Very good. Try to understand. I'll tell you that. Suppose I'm writing annotation like this. @service, public class. Just I'm writing public class. Let's write the class name. For example, I'm writing the class name. Okay, for example, I'm writing the class name called customer service. For example, I'm writing class name. So you tell me which annotation I'm writing at the class level? Service. I told there is a facility available in Spring called components auto scanning. For the facility? Auto scanning. During this auto scanning, Spring will identify what? Spring managed bean classes and will register them with the application context, the Spring application context, nothing but container. But tell me which annotation I'm writing on top of this class? Service. I told previously which annotation is required to identify that it's a Spring managed bean class? @component. But which annotation I am writing? Service. But I told you service annotation is a sub annotation of what? Component only. Which means service is also a component only. Child class is a parent class or not? Child class is a parent class. Child class is a parent class. Is a relationship is there, na? Class child class extends parent class. How do you read this? Child class is a relation, na? Child class is a parent class. I told already. Is a relation, has a relation during that time. Able to follow me? Right. Child class is a parent class. Mobile is a product. There is a class called product. There is a class called mobile. What you can write? Class mobile extends product, which means what? Mobile is a relation called extends keyword. Similarly, tell me @service annotation is a child of component. Now we can say service is a component only. Service is a component only. That's why there is no need to write once again @component also. Two annotations are not required. One is enough. Which one is enough? Service is enough. Now, service is enough. Now, by writing this annotation called @service, okay, by writing this annotation @service, now tell me this class is going to contain which logic? Business logic. This class is totally containing business logic implementations. Now tell me to identify whether this class is containing business logic implementation or data access logic implementation or presentation layer logic implementation. Do I need to go to the entire coding of the class or just annotation on top of the class? Just annotation is enough. What this annotation tells? This is a class which is containing business logic, only business logic, right? So that's why it is called what type annotation? Stereotype. Stereotype means what? A type which tells the role of a class in the project or in the application. That's called @service. Very good. Again, same thing. While registering this as a Spring with the application context, then tell me with which name it is registered. The Spring will register it in the application context with the name as what? Class name. With the name or ID as what? Class name. With the first letter in lowercase. If you want to customize it, then what can you write? Value is equal to. That is common. Value is equal to, for example, CS. Are you able to get my point? Right. Again, value, the parameter name is mandatory or optional? Optional. Right. So observe it. Service is telling that what? @service annotation tells what? This is a it is a business logic layer class. It is a business logic layer class. This class is containing business logic implementations, service layer implementations. Business layer is also called service layer implementation. It contains some business logic implementations. Very good. Observe here. I'll tell you the difference. Differences I'll tell you, but first let us understand. Let's understand. Then the question comes here. When should I write at the rate component? That will discuss later. But first you understand it. Next one is called, let's say, at the rate repository. I told this one is also a sub annotation of what? Component. Means it is also inherited from component only. It is created from component only. At the rate repository. Now, if you understand one, the others are very easy to understand. But the next one to understand here, at the rate repository. What at the rate repository tells? This class contains data access layer logic, database operations, which is called repository layer or persistence layer or data access layer. Layers are having different names. Service layer or business logic layer. Okay. Next, data access layer or persistence layer or repository layer. All the names are synonyms. These are all called what? Synonyms. Synonyms. Okay, correct? In English, there are multiple words which derive to same meaning. Okay, correct? Save is a word. Save. Right? Store. Store means what? Store the data. Save means save the data, store the data, put the data. Putting means again storing only, na? Synonyms. These are all called what? Synonyms. Yes, these are all called synonyms. Okay. Coming to the point. There is one annotation called what? At the rate repository. So again, if I write at the rate repository, do I need to write at the rate component also? No need of writing it. Because at the rate repository is telling that it is already a component only. There is no need to write once again at the rate component. Only at the rate repository is enough. If you write this annotation at the class level, then it identifies that what this class is a data access layer class. Data access layer class or persistence layer class. Any word. Persistence layer means data access layer, which is going to have database data operations, DB operations, right? For example, I'm writing at the rate repository. Observe it. I'll tell you the difference. Public class. Okay, public class. Let's say my class name is customer DAO. DAO stands for data access object. I'm writing a word like that. Actually, it's one design pattern. DAO. Data access object. Data access object. Okay, leave about that. It's one design pattern. We are going to see that very clearly. DAO, DTO, all these things. Okay. Public class, customer, DAO. There is one annotation called what? At the rate repository. By writing this repository annotation, then what this is telling that this class contains data access layer operations, DB operations, database data operations are available. Then tell me, do I need to go through the entire class or this annotation is enough to tell? Annotation. By seeing this annotation, what can I understand? This class is containing database operations logic. This class is containing business logic operations. Like that, annotations are given called at the rate service, at the rate repository. Again, with which name? It is registered in the Spring container. In the application called Spring will register this Spring Bean class with which name in the application context? Customer DAO. Already DAO capital na? Customer DAO. If I want to change it to simply DAO, then what can I do that? At the rate repository, attribute is what? Value is equal to what can I write? DAO. Okay, good. Understand it. There is other annotation I want to talk, and that is called controller. There is another annotation available called what? At the rate controller. This is also a subtype of what? Component. It is a subtype of component. Subtype means this annotation is derived from component, which we can understand in our words. This is the child interface and its parent interface is component. Because every annotation is also one interface type. a special interface type. So this controller is a child of component. So by writing this @controller, we can specify that it will specify that this particular class is a presentation layer class. Which layer class? Presentation layer class. Okay, I'm writing like this now. Observe it. @controller. @controller. Let's say public class customer controller. Okay, by writing this annotation, it is going to become like a component or not, Spring Bean class or not? Yes, because controller is a child of component. Do I need to write component one more annotation here? No, not required. Not required. Directly what we can write controller, we can write, no need of writing component again. Okay, next I am writing service. Service. What can I write here? Public class customer service. For example, I am writing @repository public class customer DAO. See, you have the three classes here. This is called what class? Controller class. Controller class means which contains presentation layer related operations. What logic? Presentation layer logic. Presentation layer logic. This is a service class which contains business logic operations. Business operations logic. Now this class is containing database operations logic. So what are the annotations here? Controller, service, repository. Three annotations you found. All these three are the sub annotations or child annotations of what? Component. That's why again component is required or not required? Not required. Suppose if I write only component, you tell me it is a presentation layer class or a service layer class or a data access layer class. For example, I'm writing, okay, somewhere I have a space here, at least I can, okay, I will write with a different color to highlight it. But okay, I'm writing here, component, are you getting my point? Component, I'm writing component, and I say the class name, public class. Please understand. My class name is validator. What's the class name? Validator is one class with some logic. Now you tell me this class belongs to, because this annotation is telling that what this is a Spring Bean class. My question is now, it has presentation logic or business logic or a data access logic? Are you able to get my point? Suppose if I write controller, you can understand what?
It's a presentation.
Suppose I have created one small mini project in Spring Boot and I have given this project code to you. I have not explained anything, just code I have given to you. Now you started opening my code. If there is a controller annotation on top of my class, what you understood?
It's a presentation.
Oh, you understood that this class contains presentation layer logic. Service annotation? There is a business logic operations are in this class. Repository? It's a database operations class. You understood like that. If I'm also writing component, then what you understood? Suppose I'm writing component only. I'm not writing controller, service, or repository. No annotation like that. Component only I'm writing. Then what you understood this about this class? This class is containing business logic. No. So whenever we write component in a project, we call that type of classes as like utility classes which could be used in multiple layers. Could be used in multiple layers. It is a utility class. It is what type of class? Utility class, a common class. It's just a component, that's it. Just a component, and it can be used in anywhere. For example, this validator class is required in the presentation layer and also in the business layer. In presentation layer also validations are required in my project. In business layer also some validations are required. Are you able to get my point? Business validations are available. Presentation validations are available. Validations are available at both the places. Okay, right? Which means this component I want to use in presentation layer code and business layer code. Means what? It is a general purpose component. What type of component? General purpose component. If I write like that, it's a general purpose component. It could be used in anywhere. It is a kind of utility class. It's a kind of what class? Utility class. It is one utility class. It is a utility class, and this class could be used in any layer, in the presentation layer or service layer or data access layer, wherever if required. This is called what type of component? Utility class. So to define such type of utility classes, which annotation we are going to write? At that component. What this component says, it is a Spring Bean component, and it could be used in any layer. Any layer means in the presentation layer code, or in the while writing the service logics, or when you are writing the data access logics. Based on requirement, you can use anywhere. You can use anywhere. You can use anywhere. That's what we can write. Are you able to get my point? For example, how to understand utility classes, sir? I'll give you. You all guys having some knowledge on collections. You know, there are main types of collections called list, set, queue. These are the child interfaces of collection interface. List, set, queue. Right? Now my requirement is, I have a list object, array list, linked list, doesn't matter. I have a list object. But by default, a list object is not a thread safe object. By default, a list object is not a thread safe object. By default, a list object is not a thread safe object. Are you able to get my point? Right? So try to understand, sir. Okay. All these are important, guys. So one thing I want to tell you, a clarity that, okay, now market is looking for, there is a huge demand for the people who have the knowledge of Java, Spring Boot with microservices, Java full stack. Okay, right. Yesterday, a walk-in drive conducted in TCS. Okay, correct. On Saturday, at some point of time, I got to know about that. I shared even that poster with Ashok also. There is a walk-in drive experience from 4 to 8 years. Experience from 4 to 8 years. Very few people attended. Especially in TCS only, they are looking for more Java people. They don't have even a single resource on bench for Java. Okay. మళ్ళీ మన పొలంలో మొలకలు ఎత్తాయి. సినిమాలు ఉంటది కదా, పొలంలో మొలకలు వచ్చాయి. Okay, there is a huge demand for Java. Okay, especially I know in TCS, a guy joined as a fresher recruitment ఉంటది కదా, colleges somewhere after వాళ్ళని జస్ట్ 2 to 3 years TCS ఉత్తగానే పోషించింది. వాళ్ళకి ప్రాజెక్ట్ లేదు. ఓకే, TCS లో అడ్వాంటేజ్ ఏంటంటే ఎన్ని సంవత్సరాలు బెంచ్ మీద ఉండొచ్చు. మిగతా కంపెనీస్ లాగా 3 months 4 months బెంచ్ మీద ఉంటే పింక్ స్లిప్ అట్లా ఉండదు TCS లో. అందుకోసం పీపుల్ TCS లో హైక్ తక్కువ ఉన్నా కానీ అదొక గవర్నమెంట్ జాబ్ లాగా ఉంటుంది.
లేదు సార్, మళ్ళీ స్టార్ట్ చేశారు TCS లో కూడా.
రైట్, 2 years, ఆల్మోస్ట్ 2 to 3 years. ఆ తర్వాత ఇప్పుడు స్టార్ట్ చేశారు తీసేయటం. ఆల్మోస్ట్ 2 to 3 years, a guy joined as a fresher without a project. has got experience of 3 years in the TCS. Right? ఇప్పుడు వాళ్ళు ఏం చేస్తారంటే బయటకు వచ్చి వేరే కంపెనీకి అప్లై చేసుకుంటారు 3 years ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ పెట్టి. They have genuine experience now. They worked in TCS. They were in TCS. Okay. ఇప్పుడు వాళ్ళంతా పోయి now TCS is looking for the people. Actually, they said 4. ఓకే ఇంటర్వ్యూలో మా ఫ్రెండ్స్ ఉన్నారు. ఓకే వాడే నాకు పోస్ట్ పంపిస్తే నేను అశోక్ పెట్టా. అరే నీకేమంటే తెలిసి ఉంటే పంపిరా నేను లాగుతారు. ఓకే నెక్స్ట్ వీక్ కూడా ఉంది, నెక్స్ట్ సండే, నెక్స్ట్ సాటర్డే. ఓకే వాట్ ఈ సెయింగ్ ఇస్ దే ఆర్ సెయింగ్ 4 years. 3 years ఉన్నా పర్లేదు పంపించేయండి. 4 years అవసరం లేదు, 3 years ఉన్నా చాలు. నువ్వు నా రెఫరెన్సెస్ పంపించే నేను ఉంటాను ఒకట. Like that, I'm telling you. So there is especially people are looking for the guys who are having this knowledge of Spring Boot microservices. Okay, they are looking for Spring Boot microservices, Java full stack. Okay, like that kind of people. Okay, all right. అది నా వాట్సాప్లో ఉంది పోస్ట్. ఇప్పుడు మీకు ఓపెన్ చేస్తే నా వాట్సాప్ అంతా మీకు తెలిసిపోద్ది కాబట్టి నేను ఓపెన్ చేయను. ఓకే రైట్. నేను ఎవరెవరితో చాటింగ్ చేస్తున్నా. ఓకే గుడ్ గుడ్. ఓకే ఇట్స్ ఓకే గుడ్ గైస్. యా 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 విల్ మూవ్ ఆన్. సి దెర్ ఇస్ లిస్ట్, సెట్ అండ్ క్యూ. There are 3 interfaces available. On a serious note, we'll start with. But please try to focus on. There is handful of opportunities are available, but try to prepare well. List, set, queue. There are 3 interfaces available. List, set, queue. Are you able to get my part? Right. Good. Come to the point. You know, by default, list is not a thread safe object. Set is also not a thread safe object. Even queue is also not a thread safe object. There is a class available called collections. And this class exclusively contains static methods only. This class exclusively contains what methods only? Static methods only. We should be very strong in collections. We should be very strong in collections. Okay? Collections are chala strong undali. Everyone Java candidate means he must be very strong in collections. Okay? At midnight, 12 o'clock, if any question is asked in the interview, you should be in a position to tell the answer in collections. You should be very strong in the collections. Okay, good. Nice. Come to the point here. There is a class available called what? Collections class. This class exclusively contains what methods only? Static methods only. Static methods only. By using the static methods of this collections class, I can able to make a list object as a thread safe object, or even a set object also as a thread safe object, or queue object also as a thread safe object. List, set, queue. Tell me, this collections class can be used only with list? No. Is it only used with set? No. Is it used with only queue? No. It could be used with multiple types of objects. That's why we call this type of class as a utility class. It is one utility class. Similarly, in Spring, I'm talking about component annotation. So by writing @component annotation, what does it mean? What does it mean? By writing @component annotation, what does it mean? This is a one Spring Bean class. It's a Spring Bean component, but this could be used in any layer. Depends on requirement. Either it could be in the presentation layer, or it is in the service layer, or it is in the data access layer. If any general purpose component you want to create like that, then we are going to use which annotation? @component. Otherwise, we are going to use more specific one. What are the most specific ones? Not general, most specific ones. Who are the most specific ones? @service or @repository
control.
or @controller. Did you understand this? Very good. Try to understand. 1 second. I'll repeat. Next. Okay. There is one more annotation available called @REST controller. For the annotation name @REST controller. Cool. So @REST controller is also one stereotype annotation. And as usual, it is also a sub annotation of what? At the rate component. At the rate component. And this at the rate test controller indicates that this class is a REST API class. Which class? REST API class. In the applications frameworks, how they are got introduced, I have given some diagrams. In your document also, the diagrams are available. In the very last diagram, for integrating the UI components, the front end and back end business logics, in the middle, one more layer got implemented. That layer is called API layer, REST API layer. What API layer? REST API layer. So what the REST control annotation tells? This class is a API layer class. Which class? API layer class, REST API layer class. Which annotation used to say that? At the rate REST controller. So these are all 4 annotations which are derived from component. See, please try to understand this. There is one annotation called service, repository, controller, REST controller, REST controller. All these annotations are derived from which annotation? At the rate
Component.
And when we are writing application, mostly we are going to use these 4 annotations. Maybe at 1 or 2 components, whenever we are writing some utility classes, then we are going to use which annotation? At the rate component. If at the rate component, it is a general purpose Spring Bean component, and this could be used in multiple layers: service, repository,
layer.
controller, REST controller, any layer at any place. Okay, right? Service means what? It is specifically containing business logic component. Okay, I will tell you. So why can't write component? Why should we write service? I'll tell you those kind of answers. Next, first I want to show you something by opening through Google. See, I want to explain that. I'll add all these points to you, but before that, first of all, I wanted component annotation Spring. At the rate component in Spring. We want to open the documentation. You can see, everybody, you can see what the annotation name? Yes. Okay. What this indicates that the annotated class is a component. Are you able to get my point? Okay. Right. So try to understand. This is an annotation to indicate that it is a component. This is one annotation. Every annotation is what? Interface. Remember that in Java, annotations are not classes. They are special interfaces. Which keyword used for creating such type of interfaces? At the rate interface. At the rate interface. I told remaining I don't want to say, but one thing I want to say. For every annotation while creating, some target is fixed. What's the target here? Type. Type means I told yesterday. Class. Yesterday means target. Class or interface. Type means class or type means interface also. Interface also could be the type or class also could be the type. Type. Very good. So I want to next start annotation called at the rate service. I want to open the documentation. At the rate service. Okay. Tell me what's the annotation name? Service. But if you look at this, target is available here. Available. So target is what? Type. Type means what? Class or interface. Means mostly we are going to use with class. But on top of this, you are also finding component here. Means what you understood now? This is a way how derived components are created in annotations. This is called derived annotation or sub annotation, child annotation. Who is a child annotation? Service. of which annotation? Component. Means who is the base of service? Component. That's what I want to say. Am I clear with this? Very good. Right. There. Okay. Next. Repository you can find like that. Controller you can find out. REST. I want to directly start with REST controller. I don't want to open everything. REST controller. You can see again, guys. Everybody understand this? At the rate interface, what's the name? What's the name? REST controller. But for the REST controller, on top of that, you are finding what? Controller. Controller. Okay, let us open the controller. Tell me, on top of the controller, what is there? Component. Means REST controller is a child of controller. Controller is a child of component. That's a hierarchy. Of course, indirectly, REST controller is also a component only. Am I right or not? Class A, class B extends A, class C extends B. Who is a base class of C? B. B base class is A. Indirectly for C also base class is what? A. Like that. So, of course, there is annotation called controller. What is the parent of it? Component. I have opened REST controller. REST controller annotation base is controller. Controller. Next, we will start understanding one more thing, guys. I'm also writing one more annotation called configuration. I'm going to tell you about this next. Configuration. Could you guess the configuration? One more annotation available. But who is the base of it? Component. Are you able to get my point now? Okay. 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 Please try to understand. So, I want to, okay, if I want to write the proper hierarchy, could you guys tell me how to write the hierarchy here? First of all, tell me who is the parent annotation? Component. 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 Tell me who are the childs? Service. Repository.
Controller.
Next one is what? Controller. Again for controller, who is a child? REST controller. Component. Configuration. Right? And if I start writing hierarchy for this, hierarchy is like this now. Service, annotation derived from component. Repository is also derived from component. Controller is also derived from component. REST controller is derived from controller, and configuration is also derived from component. Did you guys understood now? About configuration I'll talk next, but first we are discussing about these four. Okay, cool. Again, listen. So the very popular question in interview, okay, that an interviewer might ask a question like this. He might ask a question. I am writing component. Public class. Let's say my class name is customer service. You may get a question in the interview. Actually, this class is business logic class. What class? But I am writing which annotation on top of it? Component. According to the component definition, according to the component, it is indicating that what it's a Spring Bean component, general purpose component, right? But actually in this class, what logic I am writing? I am writing business logic, but I am writing component. Will you get any error? So a question like this. It's a very common question, popularly asked question, millions of times asked. Okay, this is business logic. I am writing business logic, but I am writing which annotation on top of it? Component. Got my point? You may get a question like this. Means can I write component? Can I write at the rate? Actually, what annotation I should write? Service. But in place of that, which one I want to write? Component. I want that component instead of at the rate service. Will it work? Is a question. Are you able to follow me? Yes. So, means you have to identify the difference between writing at the rate service and at that component. This question will come. Now, answer for this question, very important. What is the answer for this question is, if you write at the rate component, for example, when you add at the rate component annotation in your business logic, okay, if any transactions are required, what required? Generally, business logic definitely contains transactions if you talk about real-time scenarios. If any transactions are required in the business logic, then these transactions are not supported or not executed. If you write what? Component. Business logic transactions will not be executed, or will not be supported if you're at what annotation? At that component. But if you're at other service, yes, the transactions are supported. Spring will add transaction support. So when the Spring will execute the transactions or support the transactions, if suppose that component is a service, if that Spring Bean class is a service class, then only Spring has inbuilt transaction support. I mean, you no need of writing much logic for executing the transactions. Either it could be the local transaction or it could be the distributed transaction. Local transaction means like what I can say, a transaction which is working on a single database. Distributed transaction means what? A transaction which is working on multiple databases. Like, suppose you are transferring money from your account to your friend account. Both of you guys are having the account in same bank. It is called what type of transaction? Let's say local transaction. But for example, your account is in one bank, your friend's account is in another bank. It's called what type of transaction? Distributed transaction. Easy to understand. We'll see transactions later completely. But first, I want to tell you this thing. Am I clear with this now? Right. So tell me, when Spring will add the transaction management support? Transaction management support is added if the component is a service. Component means class. If the class is a service. If it is a just general purpose component, then Spring does not allow or does not provide the transaction management support. So which means if my business logic operations are also containing transaction management, then which annotation I should write? Service. If my logic does not contain transaction management or nothing, just simple business logics like what we are writing in the class, of simple operations, then you tell me in that case, which annotation is also okay? Component also okay. But when you come to real-time scenarios, definitely business logic also contains what? Transaction features. Transaction management is required. Okay. That's why in case of real-time, we are going to add which annotation at the business logic class? At the rate service. At the rate service. So try to understand all these things. Next. Similarly, at the rate repository is there. What's the annotation? At the rate repository annotation is available. Public class. Some class. Customer DAO. What happens here also, without writing repository, I want to write at the rate component. If I write at the rate component, it is going to become like a general purpose Spring Bean class. We are not in repository. In place of that, what we are writing? Actually, what logic I am writing here? Database operations only. What operations? Database operations I am writing. Database operations I am writing. Correct? But which annotation I am writing on top of it? Component. If you write like this, will it work or not? Will you get any compile time error? Will you get any error red mark here? No. 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 But what to understand here? If, for example, you read component, not repository, right? Generally, while performing any database operation, if any exception occurs, database exception occurs, database exception, JDBC exception. If any JDBC exception occurs, Spring will convert that checked exception to unchecked exception. Because in Spring framework, we have all unchecked exceptions. You know, exceptions are two types. Everywhere, wherever you go, core Java will follow. So what is the important concept in the life of Java developer? Core Java. Core Java is very important. Compulsory core Java రావాలి సచ్చినట్టు అది వస్తేనే మిగతా వస్తాయి లేకపోతే రావు. Okay, you know, previously there was what is that mobile Hutch, HUTCH. Okay, Hutch mobile. Hutch is like Airtel. We have Hutch once upon a time. Am I right? Hutch తర్వాత Vodafone అయింది. Okay, Hutch later renamed as Vodafone. అంటే ఆ కంపెనీ పోయి ఈ కంపెనీ వచ్చింది Vodafone and Hutch. Okay, there is a ad. Hutch ad is there in TV. ఒక కైట్ పట్టుకొని వాడు వెళ్తూ ఉంటాడు, మళ్ళీ వాడు వెనకాల చిన్న కుక్క పిల్ల వస్తుంది. క్యాప్షన్, వేర్ ఎవర్ యు గో ఐ విల్ ఫాలో. ఓకే, సేమ్ థింగ్ ఫర్ జావా. ఓకే, రైట్, గుడ్. సో అండర్స్టాండ్ హియర్ JDBC checked exceptions. So suppose if any exception occurs in the database operations, if I write repository, then Spring will convert that checked exception to unchecked exception. If I write component, it will not convert. It will not convert the checked exception to unchecked exception. If it is not converting from checked to unchecked exception, then you must handle the checked exceptions by keeping the code in try and catch blocks, or you should at least propagate the exception by using throws keyword. Those things you must write. Are you able to follow me what the point I am saying now? Good. That means there is a difference. Just at least you will understand now, but more understanding will get when you are working with the application development with REST API, MVC, and all those kind of things. So practically, technically, can we write service component in place of service or not? Okay. Can we write or not? Yes, we can write. But practically, when you are writing the real-time applications, not possible. Not possible means what we will lose? Transaction management support. What support? Transaction management support. If I read here, we will lose exception translation. What is that? Exception translation from checked to unchecked. We will lose that feature. That's why whenever you're writing business logic layer class, it is recommended to write what? Service. When you're writing a data access layer class, which one is recommended to write? Repository. When to write @ component, sir? When you're writing a general purpose component and you want to use it in multiple layers, then you can write what? @ component. Okay. So whatever annotations you have learned today, I'll add the notes later. But today you got very important annotations. These are all comes under one category called what type? Stereotype. Of course, @ configuration, I'll tell you tomorrow. @ configuration annotation, I'm going to tell you tomorrow. This is not yet completed. Okay, right? What are the remaining we completed? Component is base. We discussed about @ service, @ repository, @ controller, @ REST controller. These annotations, we got it. Okay, next, one more comes under the stereotype annotations. Who is a one more? Configuration. So these are all component, service, repository, controller, REST controller, configuration. All these annotations comes under one category called as what? Stereotype annotations. Stereotype annotations. These are all called stereotype annotations. What do you mean by stereotype? It is a type which tells the role of a class. Which tells the role of a class. This is called what type annotations? Stereotype annotations. But we will continue tomorrow, folks. I'll write the notes also tomorrow. Only one more time I'll explain, then I will write because they are very, very important. Throughout Spring Boot and microservices, all these annotations we are going to use. Today, whatever we have discussed, and of course, whatever annotations we are going to see, all annotations is required in writing Spring Boot and microservice applications. Okay. Thank you. We'll continue tomorrow, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So